Guys, you know as well as I do that I could have just uploaded last week's game review and changed the thumbnail, and no one really would have been the wiser. We're kind of in a rut with the Kansas City Chiefs doing the same things over and over again, but winning. So, what is there really to talk about? What is there really to dissect? Well, there are some things that we can talk about and dissect, but how do you really feel about a win like this? Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing off the top. We keep hearing from the national media, and I know why listen to the national media. I'm at work. I've got this. I got a headphone in. Whatever it is that comes up on YouTube, right? We keep hearing from the national media that they keep winning these close games. At some point, it's going to bite them. At some point, it's just not going to work out for them. At some point, there won't be a literal last-second blocked field goal. But they are winning these games, and there are last-second blocked field goals, and it might not seem all that skillful against a 500 team like the Broncos to get yourself in position to block that last-second field goal, but ask the Ravens how they wish they could have been in position to block a last-second field goal against the Browns. The Ravens have lost 3 games, and they have lost them. Sure, they have some high-margin victories. Congratulations. Do you get style points? Because if you do, someone might want to tell Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, but I don't think you do. There is no FBS. There is no FCS. There is no college football playoff ranking. It's just the playoffs. That's what matters. So, moving into headlines, living legend Leo dooms donkeys. There is something to be said for alliteration, and for a play so pretty as that, you need a little bit of alliteration because boy, oh boy, and I think that is the only headline that I really needed to write for this one. The big ideas about this game, 9-0 is tying a franchise record. It has essentially sealed the playoff bid. It has essentially sealed the division. You have 3 wins and 3 tries, 1 over each of the division foes. You have 9 wins, 10 pretty much gets you into the playoffs on any given year. You have the 1 seed by 2 games. It absolute madness right now. Leading into that second point there, 15 consecutive wins. Guys, we haven't seen this team lose a game since Christmas last year. We're coming up pretty quick on Thanksgiving. Now, the real test is going to be next week. I think we all know that. Heading into the Bills game, will the Chiefs be able to move the streak to 10-0, 16 straight victories? But what do you talk about on this end of things? I try. I do my best. But when we're talking about a 15th consecutive win, on some level, doing this, on some level, the talking heads that you see on media, on the TV, on some level, the guys that all chiefed up, etc., on some level, the reason their show exists, the reason my show exists, is to talk about things we don't agree with, right? That's what makes it more interesting. Honestly, that's what makes it more interesting. When I started this channel, it was a season where there weren't quite so many wins all the time, not consecutive wins, and there were a couple different positions on the field that the Chiefs really looked like they could use an upgrade, and there was stuff to talk about. And I'm not going to come out here and claim that anybody had a good game against the Broncos. I don't really think anybody did. but there's nothing really to complain about either. There's this, I suppose. When you hold a team to 14 points, it isn't supposed to take a blocked field goal to win the game. That's basically the only thing that there is to talk about, to complain about. The most interesting thing, perhaps, to come out of this game is the uneasy feeling that the Broncos are going to be a problem. If you have been around here for about a year or so, you know that I was talking about Audric Estime and how Audric Estime reminded me an awful lot of Kareem Hunt coming out of college. Not the fastest guy in the world, but you couldn't knock him off his feet, did fall forward, all of these things. I think those things are holding true. Bo Nix, I did not believe in Bo Nix coming out of college. And I'm not going to say that he looks like an all-star or a superstar or an all-pro or a super pro, but does look like he can run that offense. Guys, I think the Broncos are a couple draft picks away from, and they've drafted well, and I think they are a couple draft picks away from really sort of making some noise in the division. So the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have some things figured out before next season gets here. Here's the last thing I want to say on the big ideas. It's easy to look at that game and say that Trent McDuffie struggled, and that's true. He did struggle. He did not have a great game. But I think more than that, it is a symptom of the symbiotic nature of defense. The defensive line feeds the defensive backs feed the defensive line, the linebackers are somewhere in the middle. It is, I think, probably because Jalen Watson was a good corner that went down that suddenly, so earlier in the season, Drew Tranquill didn't look all that great a couple times. Nick Bolton looked super slow a couple times, but it was always one or two players, right? Often early in the season, it was the linebackers. Now we're starting to see it creep up in the secondary. And guys, I don't know where the pass rush is. So Charles Omenihu cannot come back at a better time whenever it is that he decides to come back. But I think the nature of the defense being so symbiotic is what is making a player like Trent McDuffie look bad. This is one of those things that sort of pops up, right? So it's almost hard to remember now. Going into last season, we were only fairly confident in the defense. We thought they could be pretty good. We didn't think they would be 17 points a game, historic type of good. Everything gelled, everything jived last season. You had L'Jarius Sneed as cornerback 2. You had Jalen Watson as cornerback 3. Everything was good enough in the secondary to allow the defensive line to get home. Everything was fast enough in the defensive line to allow the secondary not to have to cover for too long. Everything was good enough in the linebacker core that teams knew you're not really going to run against the Kansas City Chiefs very well. Things were good enough in the linebacking crew that Drew Tranquill was solid in coverage. Maybe I don't know what I'm looking at. Drew Tranquill looks to me to have struggled mightily this season in coverage. So I think that part of the nature of this is the cornerback 2 position for the Kansas City Chiefs right now is not good enough to let the defensive line get home, is not good enough that the quarterback has to check down to whoever it is that Drew Tranquill is covering later in the play, meaning that at times the defensive line is not fast enough that the cornerback number 2 ends up getting exposed, and sometimes that ends up being the cornerback 1 gets exposed because of time, etc., right? It all just sort of feeds on itself. Now, just regular observations. I have 3 regular level observations from this game that I think are worth talking about a little bit. I think, maybe this isn't an observation because I'm thinking about something, but I think following the Bills game, what we will see is a little bit more experimentation. Not the trick play type experimentation, but the who lines up where and when type experimentation. The Kansas City Chiefs seem to, at this point, be reticent to try too much of that. The streak is still going strong. If you can get to 10 wins with that win against the Bills, you send the Bills to 8-3, and you move to 10-0 with a tiebreaker over the Bills themselves. You don't want to say that the 1 seed is wrapped up, but guys, that's as close as it can get in Week 10. After that, I think you have to start getting your cards in order for the playoffs themselves. Right now, I don't have much faith. It's crazy to say, right? I don't have as much faith in this team in the playoffs as I have in previous seasons. The style points aren't there. You wonder to yourself, well, if that's how the Broncos are playing them, would they be able to beat the Bills? How confident are you in the win over the Bills? Right? Are you one of the people that believes if the Chiefs were to play the Ravens right now, the outcome of that game would be different? I don't think it would be. At the same time, I don't know if this team is to the point where they can confidently win 3 or 4 consecutive playoff games, including the Super Bowl. But I should be. They beat the Ravens. They've beaten everyone. The Ravens haven't beaten everyone. The Bills haven't beaten everyone. The Steelers haven't beaten everyone. The Texans haven't beaten everyone. So it's a conundrum, really. Maybe it's a crisis of character for myself that I just don't understand. I don't look at this team and think, I think that they can absolutely win the Super Bowl. But I don't look at this team and think, oh yeah, that'll be a walk in the park. But I don't think we did last year either. The one thing I will say on that note, last year around this time, we saw a team that started improving. They had a major setback on Christmas, but we saw a team that started improving. We saw a team where Rashee Rice was slowly emerging as a wide receiver 1. If you can tell me the player that you think has gotten better this season, I am more than willing to listen. But I haven't noticed a lot of progress this year. There is a helicopter right above my apartment. My entire building is shaking right now. Anyway, I can't pinpoint a player that I think has consistently improved this season. We'll get to one in a couple points here that I think has gotten better, but I don't think that I've seen anyone pull the Rashee Rice development trait this season. The number 2 point here, Kareem Hunt is showing signs of wear and tear, in my opinion. He has not complained. He has popped up on the injury list a couple times, but you watch him and there was a swing pass, I think it was, that he ended up racing down the side, with which he ended up racing down the sideline, and then he stepped out of bounds. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm making this up off the top of my head completely. I don't remember Kareem Hunt ever opting to step out of bounds instead of initiate contact. But it happened yesterday. There were times where I thought Kareem Hunt was injured because he just did not get off the ground very quickly. That would stink. Now, he did not break 20 carries yesterday, but he broke 20 touches. So I don't know. The identity of this team's offense is still emerging. You imagine that it will change a little bit when Isaiah Pacheco comes back, though we do not have a definitive date as far as I know for that. That's going to be a hard time in the season for an offensive identity to change. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect for this team. The last thing I'll say here, Kingsley Sumatai's feet are better than Wanye Morris right now. I didn't think that at the beginning of the season necessarily. I think Kingsley Sumatai's feet might be better than Jawan Taylor's, at least as far as not getting himself into trouble coming off of the ball, not having to use a half second before the snap in order to get himself right. Offensive MVP, Kareem Hunt, I don't know, 14 carries for 35 yards. Hard to give the offensive MVP to a guy who had a 2.5-yard average rushing, but he had 7 receptions for 65 yards. That gives him a 100-yard day overall. Not a whole lot going on for this team in this game, whether it's on the offensive side or the defensive side. Defensive side, I guess you give the MVP to Najee Johnson, 10 tackles and a sack, despite the fact that most of those tackles were because he gave up a play. I mean, I just don't know exactly how to go. This is a weird game. The game ball, obviously, you give that to Leo Chenal. Leo is out there blocking field goals yet again. Leo is out there destroying opposing offensive linemen and just wrecking special teams plans. So there's that. I almost went with Mecole Hardman. He did not do anything actually, but he came very close to doing something. That 109-yard kickoff return that almost happened, that was probably the highlight of the game until the blocked field goal. Now the Mahomes monologue. And guys, I apologize, I don't have an ending for this one. Something is wrong with Patrick Mahomes. I've held off on this criticism for the most part of this entire season because bad plays happen, and so do bad games. And sometimes what looks like a bad throw is actually a wrong route or somebody falling down off screen. But there are too many examples of guys running wide open downfield and the ball just bounces off the turf somewhere almost near them. And to be excruciatingly honest, I don't know what it is. With Kelce and Hopkins on the field, you can't make the, quote, no receivers, end quote, argument. With Worthy on the field, you can't make the, quote, he's getting restless and none of his pass catchers can get open downfield argument. You can possibly use the happy feet argument, but Mahomes has had much better seasons with much worse lines. Go back, I promise you, go back to that 2018 season, to the 2019 season, look at some of the names that were on those offensive lines and tell me you would not take this offensive line, left tackle, right tackle, and all. But the way he missed Kelce in the back of the end zone and had to settle for a field goal that put them up 16-14, it's stunning. And it happens a lot this season. And if that was a touchdown, the field goal attempt at the end of the game doesn't even happen. You're not even in position there to have to block a field goal. So I don't know what it is. And part of me wonders, because there is no talk about it at the level of Patrick Mahomes doesn't address it. Patrick Mahomes doesn't say, oh man, my aim is off. Andy Reid doesn't, I understand, how do you address it if you're Andy Reid? You don't bring up the fact that your Hall of Fame quarterback on certain plays can't hit the broadside of a barn and looks much more like Brett Favre than he does prime Aaron Rodgers. You don't bring that up if you're Andy Reid. Part of me wonders if there is some type of lingering injury. Part of me wonders if it's something that's just not right and the team knows about it. But it's not a once-in-a-while thing right now. It's an every-game thing, and it seems, again, I'm not the expert. Maybe I don't know what I'm looking at. It seems there's an every-game thing where Patrick Mahomes just kind of doesn't even look at Xavier Worthy while Xavier Worthy is wide open. Now, part of that could be the fact that Xavier Worthy is catching about 50% of the balls that he puts his hands on. Pause. But I don't know if that's the case. Perhaps he just doesn't see him. I know that it is strange that 2 weeks in a row, 2 wins in a row, part of my takeaway is that I am less confident that the undefeated season can happen. And if anyone is ever going to go on an undefeated season again, it's going to take wins like this where you block a last-second field goal, where you have that type of luck. I understand that. But I am a little more shaky in the belief that it can happen this week than even I was last week. The Chiefs, here's the thing. All of these close victories, all of these almosts that have happened, if the Chiefs beat the Bills by a single point, all of that is washed away. I don't care anymore. All of that ifs and almosts. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, every day would be Christmas. But the Chiefs are winning, unlike last Christmas. I don't care. If the Chiefs beat the Bills by a single point, it just means that's what this team does, because the Bills are about as real as the competition gets in the AFC this season. So that's all I have for this game review. I'll be back tomorrow with something else. If you like or appreciate what it is I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.